Hey Kevin,
What's up?
what's the longest we've gone without doing a recording in the pandemic era or in the pandemic episodes? Is it three
Probably
weeks? Is it?
maybe 2 to 3 weeks tops. Well,
Yeah,
this will be the longest now.
it's been 3 weeks. It's been 3 weeks since we were last recording, and that was Thanksgiving. Tonight it's Halloween.
Yep.
So yeah, 3 weeks. I think either we're surpassing it or we're at least tying it. I have to look at the dates of the other pandemic series episodes just to be sure.
Not as long as every other month, like
Well, yeah, like we were doing before the pandemic. Yeah,
or like once a month or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
because it was
basically.
always dependent on your schedule.
Yeah, and that's my excuse over the last 3 weeks. My schedule has sucked. I've been occupied, but I think it's about to open up. And I just explained to Kevin why. That's another story. Worth, once again, it's probably why you should come to the tapings live.
Oh, so you're
So,
allowing that now?
but eventually,
Because
we're still in pandemic technically. It
I was,
is Halloween.
yeah, because I was thinking like that's not what you told me like 10 minutes ago.
Well, yeah, well, that's another story altogether.
Yeah,
Well, okay, this is the first time you're doing the Space Eater chat one on one with me.
yeah, one on one, yes.
Yes, you did. We did it a couple weeks ago or months ago when we did the when we watched Shang Chi. I think it was right
Yeah.
the night we watched Shang Chi. So this is the first time you're doing this one on one with me. So it's only Jeff to go with the Space Eaters to
Okay.
do them one on one, at least of the regular crew. Oh,
This
I
has
do
been
have a Halloween
overdue.
thought.
This
Huh?
has been
I'm sorry?
overdue.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
gonna say this was overdue because sometimes I would see you guys doing your space heaters, and then I think like, oh, how come I didn't get the invite?
Yeah. It's always on impulse when we decide to do these things.
Yeah,
So I put it out there. Only you responded. Therefore, it's just you. Way to
that's
go.
being a little facetious, but I digress.
Okay. I do have a Halloween thought. And I get it. It's not, we're all off topic from the anime roundtable. But I do have a Halloween thought or story. Funny
Go for
story.
it. Go for it.
Okay. How much in the way of Halloween candy did you buy this year?
I didn't buy any. My family bought one bag, I believe. They set some aside for people in case they came, but no one ever comes to our place because we're at the end of the street. We're right beside a big road, and
Hmm.
I don't think we turn on our lights enough so that it seems very inviting, even though we do try and turn some lights on. I
Okay.
think I think our house just doesn't seem very inviting.
It's sort of a distant area. Like I wouldn't say like completely cordoned off or anything like that or isolated, sort of.
Hmm.
Like, because I remember having visited there a couple times. See, the dilemma in my parents' neighborhood, and for reference, here at this area, trick or treating is generally not allowed, so they just have a Halloween party.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the area here. Anyway,
You
so
mean
I
your
buy the
place?
Halloween candy in my family, and I give it to my parents.
Okay.
And in past years, it used to be like I went all out, but my rule of thumb with candy is give kids something you'd want yourself. So it was always something I think okay. Like I wasn't gonna cheap out on the trick or treaters by giving them, you know, those cheap little caramels or whatever, right? So I always, so because if there's left something left over too, and often there is, then at least we don't. There's it's kind of guilt free in that sense. But as time has gone over recent years, I used to buy like at its peak, I would go to Costco and buy 4 boxes. But over the last couple of years with the pandemic, we really haven't focused on it. And because I was so busy over the last month, I didn't buy anything at Costco until it was too late. Everything got sold out. I think quantities were limited for obvious reasons. So I went to Walmart and bought just 2 small boxes, a Nestle and a Mars bar box varieties.
Okay.
And then on top of it, just to be sure, I topped it off with a bag of Reese's peanut butter cups.
Okay.
And after I left, it dawned upon me that at least one of those boxes may not survive to Halloween. Because after I left, I remembered what my mother's favorite chocolate bar is.
I see.
And lo and behold, when I get to my parents' place and tell them the Halloween candy is here and put it on the table just to let them know where it is, my mom saw the peanut butter cups and simply said, "Oh, can I open this now?" And then right away she offered a couple to my dad, and also right on cue, the the dog made it a point to get in between myself and my mom as if to protect her.
Oh, I see.
Because yeah, he knows what to do. He knows who butters his bread in that sense. Who's a good boy?
Oh
But
yeah.
I called them earlier. Yeah, I called them earlier, and they told me they didn't even get through the first box. Of course the peanut butter cups never figured into anything, but they never, you know, never didn't even get past the first box. As time has gone in the neighborhood, the kids have grown up, and my mother told me that the only people who came out tonight were teens. I think parents of younger kids were protecting them. We're still in a
Yeah.
pandemic after all, and I can't argue that.
Yeah. I feel like there are fewer kids out this year, and of course the pandemic plays into it. But I feel like over the past few years, fewer and fewer children have been going out for Halloween. Now, maybe this is all coincidental because I I feel like the last few Halloweens have been raining.
It was nice today in Toronto, I'll tell you that much, up
Yeah,
until I think sundown, and then got a little bit windy.
I would say this was the first really nice Halloween weather-wise in a few years.
I
Truly.
lost track, but I take you at your word.
It just always feels like for the past like maybe like 4 of the past 5 years it'd be raining on Halloween and you would have less people feel inclined to go get candy in the rain, I feel.
In a cold rain on top of it.
Yes. And
But yeah, that's our neighborhood.
and
Oh,
also I feel like there were fewer houses giving out candy as well. At least that's just my perception because I feel like when I trick or treated in my area, there were more houses doing it. As well as when I used to live in St. Catharines in Toronto, I felt like a lot of houses were doing it. But I feel like maybe nowadays there aren't as many, and that might be reflective of the immigrants that have come here and perhaps they don't celebrate Halloween or they don't care about Halloween, so they just wouldn't give out candy, perhaps. That's just my pet theory.
That's a fair theory. I'm wondering myself, what's the birth rate in the Toronto area these days, too? What is the percentage of little kids? Big
Hmm.
kids, well, free candy, right? I mean, this is all anecdotal. I get it. As I said, my mother said it was mainly teenagers this year. So who knows? So Halloween here. Do we want to say a word for Halloween in Tokyo? Because we've heard different things about how it is in Japan.
Well, Halloween was only embraced probably in the last few years, no?
Yeah, that's the impression I get. I think it's become more of a foreigner gathering thing, and there's a lot of for better or worse. I get the feeling when the whole table reassembles, hopefully in the next week, at least Jeff might be able to enlighten us on this, and maybe a few others who listen regularly. Maybe even Angela can give me a better sense of it as well. But I
Well,
know it's sort of a for better or worse scenario. Sometimes the celebrations there can be downright scary, but more in a weird way, not necessarily because anyone's in danger.
well, this podcast has talked about Halloween in Japan before and how foreigners would get pretty rowdy. I
Yeah, that's
remember,
what I think that's what I hinted at. This was back in version 1, wasn't it? My
yes,
memory is blurry. There's my
and I
middle
think
age
it,
beginning to show.
and I think it was Angela who brought that up too, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm. I guess we'll have to cite the episode or wherever. I guess I'd like to think in the years since, in our purgatory, the attitude has calmed down. There's a little bit more, yeah, calmness. That's the word I'm looking for. Whether it be those who celebrate it or those who have to see it and the way people react to it. But I think it's just become a little bit more accepted to some degree. But who knows? Somebody let us know. But yeah, we've had this talk before. I think the
Yeah,
only I think the only real sense of Halloween I got in terms of Japan this year was just a quick TikTok or GIF of the voice actress behind Nezuko from Demon Slayer, just wishing people happy Halloween in a bit of a costume. I think it was an angel costume. I think I sent it along to the others earlier. Check your messages, Kevin. Okay, so as I said, it's been 3 weeks since we recorded. Do we want to do a COVID update here? Things are calm for the most part. Restrictions have been lifting further. Most places are
yeah.
allowing capacity, but we are on vaccination passports, so to speak.
I went out last night with friends for dinner, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was the place was a small restaurant, so it was kind of packed as well, to be honest. Although I feel like there was still some space in between tables. I guess it depends on how you gauge space, to be honest. I went to Sugo.
Which I've never heard of.
Sugo is this
Oh
American
wait,
Italian style restaurant
yes,
on
you're
Bloor
right. Okay,
Lansdowne.
okay, yeah, I have heard of the place. Yeah, I've been to the odd restaurant myself, but yeah, it's calm at the moment. I mean, with the vaccine passport now in place in Ontario, and then it you know adding the QR code within the last couple weeks, we're maybe that light at the end of the tunnel is there, the one that I talked about at the end of 2020, and here we are near the end of 2021.
I just
So
feel
we're
like I just feel like we're hitting the endemic stage of this thing,
hmm.
and that I don't think it'll ever truly go away. I just feel
No,
like
I think there seems to be this attitude now. We have to adjust ourselves to live with this, right?
yeah, because
That's
we didn't protect ourselves enough when
mhm,
the opportunity was there. We didn't close borders quickly enough. We still allowed planes into the country from countries that had hotspots, or countries that were hotspots, I should say. So really, like, that's just out of our control as civilians. But then you're
mhm.
also dealing with people who are vaccine hesitant, or people who just don't want to be vaccinated for different reasons,
Yeah.
which is honestly, in the end, that's ultimately their decision. But
Mhm.
when you try and impose that view on others, that's when it gets problematic.
Yeah, I know. And you know who's to blame?
Who?
Each other, because that's what everybody does.
Like,
So,
so I've started seeing certain friends again that I haven't seen since before the pandemic started, even. And yeah, they would tell me, like I would be probably one of the first 5 times they've actually sat down anywhere with, like, for the sake of an
well,
example.
I mean, I started to like. I was comfortable hanging around a few friends at a point.
Hmm.
So, who knows? I feel okay right now. I can't speak for what will ultimately happen in the future. I guess that's a part of a risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, like,
I'm confident about how the vaccine has settled in me or wherever that's going to go. And we're at the stage now, I think we have to just learn to deal with it and learn to live with it and learn to control it, like other things, like the flu. Shots are out, by the way.
I feel like this pandemic really helped me, uh, financially, I'll admit, because I was fortunate to be living with my family during that time,
Uh huh.
during most of this time, I should say. So I was able to save a lot of money. I was able to, like, build up my savings, build up my investments, because I didn't need to spend $250 taking Go Transit every month. I didn't need to go out to meet people because we were technically not allowed to. So that meant we wouldn't be eating out, or I wouldn't be eating out. It meant
Yeah.
that I had no one to impress, so then I didn't need to go and buy clothing. Though truth be told, a lot of that discretionary spending went to manga instead. But I digress. That's another topic in itself.
Yeah. I guess for me, it was, well, my income was hit. I mean, at a point, I stopped hiding the fact of where I worked, and I've been on furlough from it for
Hmm.
more than a year and a half, taking
Hmm.
on various odd jobs. They've come and gone. And so financially, my income sputtered, but somehow I've managed to trudge along.
Yeah,
And plus to our dear listeners out there, and I know there's more than two of you. I get it. I make that joke all the time.
there's probably like 10 of us.
Yeah, thanks for
Probably
listening,
like
Kevin.
probably.
You
You're
too,
welcome.
Mo. Jeff, thank you so much. It's been a benefit to this show as a whole because it helped me all rediscover all of this. Even
Yeah,
as we brought the show back in 2018, weren't really there just yet. But the pandemic gave me pause for thought and just frankly gave me time to do so. So my fear for this podcast is how much can we still do as things start to settle down again?
hmm,
I mean, we got a hint of the bad side of it because, as I said, I've been occupied the last pretty much the last month or so, and we couldn't get our schedules to match properly to get together and do an episode. And I'm really sorry about that, guys.
And shit happens. I
Yeah.
know the reasons why you couldn't uh, do it, so it's understandable.
Mm-hmm. But as I said, maybe we can churn out a couple more. I think we can do more than one episode in November. Okay. On that note, let's talk about a few of the stories we've been following, or at least one story we've been following. Really, the purpose of doing the Space Heater chat is to kind of start a conversation that we can continue when everyone else comes back around the table. So, what's on your mind? Give me one thing, anime, manga, Japan wise, that has caught your attention in the last 3 weeks. One or two things, Kevin.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the Yomacon panel thing that happened.
Oh, wait, yeah, go ahead. I think I know where you're about to go with this.
So this was pointed out a few days before the con happened, and this con happened this weekend. I believe it's in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
Well, Anime Week in Atlanta's going. I know that Dave's been giddy about doing anime hell there again. I mean, it's the home of anime hell for him.
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
So someone pointed out on Twitter that Yomacon was holding a panel. I'm assuming it was a uh, fan panel. Like somebody pitched this panel, and then things get accepted or rejected and whatnot. But the title of this panel was "The Unsung Heroes of Black and White: How to Scanlate and Translate Manga." So the panel reads, "Manga is an integral part." Sorry, let me start again. Manga is an integral part of any weeb's lifestyle, but a surprising amount of work is needed to bring the glories of manga to your desired language. Join us as we take a behind the scenes look at how scan leaders all over the world perform God's work while making manga dazzling in the process. And I'm pretty sure Yomacon does have Japanese guests from time to time. I would imagine they do, but I feel like this is not something you should be holding. This should have been rejected.
It feels like it's glorifying some sort of piracy,
Yes,
right? It romanticizes it. There's another word, I guess.
yes,
I get how the industry was born, both sides of the Pacific. There's a degree of rebellion when it comes to this, when it comes to our fandom, when it comes to the industry now. Crunchyroll was born out of that, sort of.
yes, yes, they were.
The stories, of course, back in Japan, were born out of a degree of frustration. But
It,
we've had these discussions before. Like, didn't we have a version of this discussion with AnimeTube as well?
yeah,
Where
I believe so.
I mean, there's a bunch of angles here, right?
And reading the comments is kind of sad as well because, of course, the trolls come out.
What caught your attention? I haven't. I was aware of this. I was aware of this panel. I know of some well-known names in our industry. Sorry, not our industry. We're not in it. In the industry in North America, had a few things to say.
Yeah, some of the more prominent names in Anna Twitter did comment on this. Uh, Dave did comment on it. Zach Davison did as well. He's the one who translates a lot of the Gigaki no Kitaro manga.
Mhm.
among other things. And it's I look at how anime become largely legit, how we really do have a lot of people watching anime legally now because there's just so many different avenues. But I don't know if manga will ever get to that point. At least not for a long, long time, just because of the sheer amount of manga that exists. Not to mention that the prominent Japanese publishers seem to just want to keep it within their own platforms.
Hmm.
Like there will not be a at least I feel like it's gonna be a long time before we see a, a Crunchyroll of manga, if
Or a
ever,
Netflix of manga for that matter.
if
Because I was about
ever,
to. Sorry?
if ever.
Yeah, because that's what was coming to mind. We have not had that streaming moment yet for the for not just manga, but really the book industry. Kindle Unlimited, I'm not totally sure that counts. So we're not at that moment just yet. I'm not totally sure we're at that moment.
And of course, with manga, everyone's gonna find their reasons to justify it. Like, I'm looking at some of these comments now, and so, I'm not. People will cite how, oh well, the main Shonen Jump translators still misspell a main character's name in One Piece, and they often leave out jokes, or they don't do this, or it doesn't come out on time, even though it technically does come out on time. There's a
Well,
lot
yeah,
of
I mean, we're like just the whole translation thing. We've had that conversation before. That conversation is coming out again as Squid Game becomes really, really popular too.
and honestly, it's people always come up with these excuses, and in the end, I think what, just own up to the fact that you're stealing this. Like you
Try
don't
and
need to put up a
skip.
front. Yeah, like don't
Yeah, don't tiptoe.
just own it. Like because here's how I see it. Did let's say I'm asking a scan leader this. I ask them like, hey, did you ask the author for permission to do this? And then they'll probably say no. More often than not, the answer would be no. Then it's like, well, but of course they don't want to make themselves look bad, so they kind of like tiptoe around it. It's like, well,
We want to make them popular.
yeah, like you did it. It's fine. Just don't tiptoe around it. Just own up to it.
Yeah,
And of course some
like
do because they're dicks, but I digress. That's a different kind of animal too. It's
mhm.
it's really just it's really sad because as I've mentioned before, I have friends who will still pirate like Shonen Jump manga. They'll still read Shonen Jump manga legally, even though they can read it officially. They can read it for free. It's
They can
just
or they can read it for free or at worst somewhat affordable price.
like they could read it for free if they wanted to legally. They just choose not to because it's just not their preferred app. They'd rather just go to a different website where they can just read all the 200 other series that they want to read.
Yeah, own it. I get it. I mean, who are you really helping aside from yourselves?
Yeah, it's that's just all I can say. All I can do is just sigh.
Yeah, I know. Well, as I said, when the everyone else comes to the table, we'll have another take on it. I'm sure, and there'll probably be another thing, another version of this story we'll spout.
I'm genuinely curious how that panel went. I was trying to see if I can find any discourse on the panel, but then I haven't been able to find anything yet.
Well, maybe that'll be the follow up later in the week when we do a regular episode. Anything else that caught your attention?
Uh, One other thing happened. A week, 1 to 2 weeks ago, there was a collaboration between Neon Genesis Evangelion and Undercover, and Undercover is one of my favorite high fashion streetwear brands.
Okay. On the topic of fashion, one of your passions.
So it was cool to see that collab happen because I suspect that Jun Takahashi, the creator of Undercover, is an anime fan. Because this would not be the first time he's used anime graphics and acquiring the license to create product with anime on his product. So uh, I know he's done collaborations with My Melody or
Oh,
Onagai My
Sanrio.
Melody. Yes, with Sanrio.
Sanrio.
Uh, 2 or 3 seasons ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, he did one of his collections focused on the Warriors. I know that movie from the '80s about the
Yes.
gangs.
I think wasn't there either a sequel or a remake recently? Or at least within the last 10 years?
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I wouldn't
Or
know.
or a remaster, something to that effect.
So,
But it did come back into the public's eye some about a decade ago.
so what he did was he actually created 8 different like lines within that season because he wanted to create 8 different gangs, so to speak. So he designed 8 different collections, if you think about it that way. So he created 8 fictional gangs, and one of the gangs was called the Bloody Geekers. So a lot of that was that's like the nerds, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
who did he use as the main graphic? He used Creamy Mommy.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yes.
that's going the other way.
So some of uh, some of the prints have Creamy Mommy on them, as well as the mascot. I don't know the mascot's name because no one gives a shit. And it was so there was like the main mommy print, and then he created a couple of camouflage jackets where if you look very closely, you'll see mommy's face kind of just distorted throughout the shirt, like laser printed in different spots, and which is really cool. Like you have to really pay attention to notice mommy in that shirt or in that jacket.
Hmm.
So seeing that Evangelion collaboration was not too big of a surprise, and the prices were also not a big surprise. They were very expensive. Uh, it's interesting because he made some simple graphic tees with Shinji or some of the angels or some of the Evangelion robots that go for like a few $100 here and there, and then he also created these puffer jackets based off of the main three. So Shinji,
they
Asuka, and Rei.
they're plug suits or what?
The plug suits, yes, and those are like 600,000 yen, so they're like a good 5-6 thousand bucks US. He even created these like robes, I guess is how I would put it, that have the heads of the Eva of the three there, and then it even comes with an LED light switch so that the head can light up, and those are like almost 800,000 yen. Like
No,
he
somebody's
really,
willing to pay it. There's a lot of rich geeks out there.
yeah, like he went all out, I would say.
Well, I mean, it's fashion. Fashion can be pricey, but okay.
Yeah,
Fashion's art.
I was contemplating picking something up, but I'm pretty sure I'm too late at this point because yeah, a lot of that stuff sold
Well,
very
everything
quickly.
sounds like it would have been limited edition anyway.
they would only make so many, and it also depends on whether or not different stores bought different items. So
Could have gone that way.
it just depends. But I'm sure a lot of that stuff is hard to find now, and I'm sure there's a bunch of that up on Grailed as well for inflated
Mm-hmm.
prices. But I
Yeah.
always thought that was a pretty cool collaboration.
Well, it does sound interesting since we when we talk fashion, it tends to be hit and miss, right? Remember when I talked about the Ghibli dresses
Oh
a
yes,
few months ago? Anyway, my turn.
go for it.
So, which one do you want me to refer to? An old school anime property, which won't surprise you when I mention it, or do you want me to talk about what's actually happening in Japan when it comes to well mainstream news there? I have at least two stories in that sense.
We can go with the anime stuff.
Well, the anime one is pretty obvious. It's Cowboy Bebop. Like since were last with you, few more little things have come out concerning Cowboy Bebop in the lead up to the live action premiere later in November. I think it was the 16th or is it the 18th? I forget off the top of my head on Netflix. So since then, it's been revealed that much of the original Japanese anime voice cast has been hired to do the Japanese language dub of the live action. And they've gone as far as show a couple trailers, like a mini episode, and then an actual trailer came out in the last 3 weeks.
Oh, I saw those actually.
The buzz has been mixed, but at least not totally negative. I think the buzz seems to be it's a real coup to get the original Japanese voices, at least Yamadira and Hayashibara, to return. Guy who played Jet passed away back in 2018.
Oh,
So, but most of the rest of the cast is still there. Although it must be noted, and I forgot her name, but the woman who played Ed, and I know we've had this discussion whether or not Ed will ultimately appear, because to this point, Ed is missing.
yeah, that was interesting. Like
The fact that
I,
Ed's not around, if we're gonna cast Ed in her Japanese voice, the actress who played her actually long retired from voice acting. She's a singer now. She's gotten
oh,
more into music, but she really, I think she retired from voice acting in the mid aughts. She was
interesting.
seven. I think she was 17 when she got the role. By the way, in the first place,
I see.
there there's a extra that shows interviews with the entire voice cast, the Japanese voice cast, and they showed her, and I think she was in a school uniform too. And then I think we surprised people when I think it was the first exposure many of the Western audience saw of Koichi Yamadira. So when people see what Spike looks like and then realize what the guy who played him looked like, I remember showing that in a club and it got a few laughs because if you know what Yamadira looks like, he's a rather nerdy looking character. We've made other jokes about him. Check recent episodes, especially of his marital life, and see at least what his ex wives look like. But it is interesting that they brought in the cast. But it does lend credence to how dedicated the showrunners and everybody involved in that production are to really wanting this to look good. And I know we'll have a lot more to say on it as we lead up to the premiere of the live action later in November. So, there's a conversation starter, and I know James and Mo will add to that. But let's put that out there now. Yes, we saw that. Yes, it caught my attention. For me, it doesn't change my attitude concerning watching it, especially as I said, since I know John Cho seriously hurt himself in the first days of filming that. But I just want to see what they do with it, see how it compares, and we can have that debate. So we'll talk about that. Okay. Last episode, we also talked about the new Prime Minister of Japan. And I'm looking it up again, just being sure I get the name right. Fumio Kishida. He was elected the head of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party in Japan. We talked about him in the context of him making a promise to help the soft power industries in Japan. We've had that long discussion about how the anime and manga industry and those involved in it actually involved in its production are around the poverty line. That's another story altogether. I know we'll eventually get back to that. But what was fascinating, or what got interesting later on, was after taping, almost immediately, Kishida called an election, dissolved the lower house, the House of Representatives, and called an election. And that election was today, here, October 31st, Halloween here. And the results are in. And the ruling LDP, the ruling coalition, because it's actually two parties, the LDP, which is a center-right party, and then Komeito, which is a little further to the right party. Sorry, did I say center-left? It's center-right, the LDP. And then Komeito, which is a little further to the right. They maintained their majority hold on the lower house, but it's reduced from before. It's a combination of first past the post and proportional representation. I forgot the exact ratio, though. But the opposition parties made a few gains. So it's sort of like what happened here in Canada as well. But this is a majority situation. And I'm not totally sure how much really changes here. It's still a solid mandate, I guess. If it's a majority. But who knows? Even the LDP by themselves hold majority. It's just not to the same degree they did before. But it does give a fresh mandate to Kishida as he begins his prime ministership, or whatever we call it, his rule. So that's one story that caught my attention, and let's see how he follows through on the promise to soft power industries in Japan.
Yeah.
I guess that's the relevant part to us in the fandom. The other one is a story that we've I've always had a small fascination with it. I think if you listened to our chat with Fred Schott back in 2019, one of the things we talked about at length was him meeting the then Crown Prince and Crown Princess, Naruhito and Masako, who are now the Emperor and Empress of Japan. So we talked a little bit about the imperial family of Japan back then. The news this week, if you kept up, is there is somebody left the imperial family. The eldest daughter of the current crown prince, Princess Mako, she married out of the family. Imperial law states that any woman who was born into the family, any princess, if they marry, they are out of the royal family. So Princess Mako can now just be referred to as Mako Komoro. Married her university sweetheart earlier this week, who, because not too long after they announced their engagement, about 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, I think, back in 2017, a small scandal erupted surrounding his family, and like his mom was embroiled in over a money issue with an ex-fiance, and it ended up, of course, looking bad on everybody in the Komoro family,
as those things do.
as those things do. I mean, James can sometimes talk a little bit about the microscope that the British royal family is under, and that exists in Japan in its own weird way. Like it's still very stressful, but in its own subtle way. And I think that's a long discussion in and of itself. But there's a lot of people who did not agree with this marriage in Japan. There were protests on this. But then again, there has been known to be, a lot of hardliners within Japan over how the royal family should be. This is the downside of, okay, after the war, they kind of redefined the role of the emperor. And it must be noted, and I will get back to this point right after. It must be noted that the succession only goes through the males, only goes through the men. So the next person in line to the throne would have been the eldest son of the current emperor, Naruhito. But it isn't. It's his younger brother, who's named Fumihito. He's the crown prince now, and he'll inherit whenever Naruhito, for whatever reason, leaves. And who's next? Fumihito's youngest son, or only son, who's his youngest child, Hisahito. And then who's after that? That's it. It's a shrinking family. There's a lot of pressure on that young man now, on poor Hisahito. But it gets more interesting concerning the women. As I said, they have to leave the family. So now just to go back just backtrack a little bit. There was so much pressure on Naruhito and Masako to produce a male heir. And they only have a daughter who's now, I think, 19. That's it. But there was so much pressure on Naruhito to produce a male heir that there were some people, I'm not going to say a lot because I really don't know, but I know there were rumblings that he should take up a concubine just to get that. Never happened. And with Hisahito now there's at least a more clear, longer line of succession, unless something happens to the poor young man. But it's even more pressure for the women, because there's this phrase, and once again, I forgot to bring it up. After the war, we ended up having more of a clarification over the role of the emperor. My understanding is the emperor is not that known to be the head of state of Japan. I don't really know who is. I guess that's the head of government, so the prime minister, I suppose. I would have to double check that. But if you're to translate the actual role of the emperor, I constantly hear this phrase. The emperor is the symbol of the state and the unity of the people. That's the vague translation of, I guess, their role. And I guess in turn, that's sort of the rest of the imperial family. So, I mean, I felt for Masato. I feel for Mako what she's going through now, because she's, I think she's happy to be married and not have to be under that microscope anymore. Her and her husband Kay, they are moving to New York while Kay pursues his certification. He didn't pass he did go to law school in New York, didn't pass the bar exam. He does work as a law clerk presently, but is trying to get his full certification to become a lawyer. And she's out of the public eye, at least in Japan. They'll eventually move to New York in the very near future. And she'll live as a commoner. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think has been unnecessarily dividing people. I mean, this is quite a responsibility for somebody who has absolutely no shot to ascend the throne and who will have nothing to do with its ascension. So, just a little thought, a thought on my head. And as I said, royal families are one of those fascinating things for me, whether it be in Britain and then Japan. And the story of the royal family is something I've personally kept up with since around the time Naruhito and Masato got married more than 30 years ago. I think it's been more than 30 years, give or take, I guess. But those are the stories that have caught my attention over the last 3 weeks. Not all anime related, but certainly Japan related. And maybe worth a talk when Jeff, Mo, and James come back around the table in the next week or so. Okay, I rambled for the last 10 minutes. I think, Kevin. I don't know. Do you want to add anything, or you just want to hear what I said?
I don't know what else I could add to that because that's just something that I don't follow, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. It's just I figured it's just something that I like following. It's a very, it's a very Japan thing, and I like to think the listeners of this show hold a little bit of curiosity about the Japanese society itself. We joke around about it, otaku, weebs, whatever, Japanophiles. So keep up. This is the way I'm keeping up. That's all.
Mhm.
So I thought I'd put all those thoughts out there. Just lay it out for for about an hour because we're almost an hour into chatting. I think, Kevin, certainly over
Yeah.
50 minutes.
Uh, I actually only just saw this now, but
Oh, you
um,
have something to add before we go?
well, two things, I guess. The Spy Family anime got announced officially.
Hmm.
It was rumored, and it was really just a matter of when, not if. But yeah, it's 100% official now because it had been leaked in a sense before this. But ooh, I think that anime will blow up. It's
The
a very
next
popular
big
manga.
thing,
It's a very popular
perhaps.
manga, so I
That
expect
it?
that to be very well received when that
Okay, I
comes out
think we
next year.
can. I'll look up the headline a little more later on. Anything else though?
Uh, Yomacon actually did respond to that uh, that tweet that I read, and I actually forgot to credit uh, the author of the tweet. It was Nicole, who well, Nicole F. She's a freelance translator for some of the manga pubs,
Oh
like
boy.
Seven Seas and like Kodansha and Iridori Comics as well. So Yomacon did
Speaking of
respond to
slapping the face of
yeah,
the legit parts of it, right?
yeah. Yomacon posted a long response. I'm not gonna read that because it is a literal wall of text, but that's something we could potentially talk about next time.
Okay. Well, I have
Uh,
heavens knows I have time to look.
yeah. Oh,
But as I said, this is just something to get our feet wet since we haven't been around for a couple weeks.
yeah. Oh,
It's a space heater chat, right? Oh,
by
do you
the
have something
way,
else?
did that Demon Slayer box set ship to you yet, or is that not out yet? I don't remember anymore.
It's not out. Apparently, I got a email from Indigo that said it was delayed at least into November, I believe. So I haven't been. It hasn't been shipped yet.
Okay.
A few things are actually delayed. I think the first hardcover of what is it? Oh, the I forgot the name off the top of my head too.
Silent
Silent
Voice.
Voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been delayed too. Instead of New Year, I think it's into spring now.
Yeah, I put in an order for the first half of the quintessential quintuplets box set. I think it compiled the
Mhm.
first 7 volumes or so. That got pushed back a couple times on my end.
Yeah, this could be a story later on, I think, because it sounds like it's not these. Like it sounds like there's a handful of titles that have now hit the delay.
Yeah, because there's still delays with like the printers and whatnot. That's been an ongoing thing that's been happening.
Hmm. Like,
Um,
I mean, I admit I have not always been eager to get the most recent releases. So, like, these are the most recent ones, and here they are, and we're in the middle of a delay.
yeah,
But this
all
might be a story worth keeping up with in the next little bit.
it's gonna be interesting to see how long these things get delayed for. Because I know for quintessential quintuplets, I want to say it was at least twice, maybe even three times.
Hmm. Well, well, maybe we'll set an over under as to when these at least some of these titles we're looking forward to will come out.
Yeah. Oh,
Anyway,
I got a Switch
oh,
too, by
one
the
last
way.
thing
Got a Switch.
before my voice gives out. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying that I got a Switch recently too.
Oh, congratulations! Finally.
Yeah.
Well, not to say I know the world all that well, but yeah, that's pretty cool. Can we do something about the PS5, please?
I
MacBooks too, by the way. That's
got
another
that.
story. I'll tell you that off air.
I got the OLED model
Well, that's good then.
because I was waiting for that mid-cycle refresh, and this seems like this was it, so I bought it.
Yeah, that's this. I think this is the mid-cycle refresh, but yeah, no, it's good. For any first impressions, just quickly.
I have not turned it on yet because I'm waiting for a screen protector.
It's kind of like my mother with her iPad Mini.
Because it technically comes with a very thin film protector
Doesn't
thing,
sound like much.
but I just would prefer to have a screen protector at this point. So yeah, I'm just waiting for that to come in, and then I'll boot it up and play Pokemon. And
Well, way to go with the patience.
yeah, and I'm waiting for Shin Megami Tensei 5 to come out in a couple weeks too. That's probably another thing that I'll be trying to play.
Hmm. Okay. Well, have fun with it. I guess I'll have to figure out my next watch after Kaguya-sama Love is War. I finished season 1 finally yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I haven't watched
Yeah, I
season
like
2
it.
yet. I like season
Well,
1
yeah,
too.
I'd have to go on officially on Funimation, but I guess we'll go unofficial. Oh yeah, and I guess I want to acknowledge this story before we go tonight cuz it could turn out kind of interesting later on. Our friend Jesse Betteridge, he texted me a few days ago mentioning that Crave has picked up a handful of HBO Asia titles.
Huh.
So chief amongst them to me are Master of the Shadowless Kick, which is a prequel to the Once Upon a Time in China series because it follows
Oh.
the adventures of Wang Feihong's father, Wang Keiying, and Miss Sherlock, the Japanese series, which was such a hit when it came out a few years back. I'm going to look this up just quickly because now I have to type it in. Remember, we talked about its star. We talked about its star Yuko Takeuchi earlier this year because she was also the star of the 7 Year Goodbye, which was featured during the Japan Foundation Film Festival Plus. She made news, unfortunately, a year ago when she committed suicide, and but Miss Sherlock is considered one of her last great works. She's the titular character, and I think the first time they adapted Sherlock Holmes into a female. So it takes a really fascinating portrayal. Those two shows are premiering on Crave in I think mid-November or early November. So it sort of makes sense because Crave holds the HBO rights in Canada, although I think that still had to be a separate deal. I believe Miss Sherlock appeared on Hulu also in the States, but in much of the rest of the world, it would have been on whatever version of HBO would have existed regionally. So, or I think in Asia, but in other parts, it might have been on Netflix. So we were wondering which part of the equation would it eventually go, and it went with the Crave, the HBO Canada part of the equation.
Okay.
But Miss Sherlock is a very sounds like a really fascinating take on the Sherlock Holmes story. I think people said it has more of the Benedict Cumberbatch feel to it, so that could be just interesting in and of itself. And sadly, if there is a second season, it won't be with its star, so I guess there won't be a second season. Yuko Takeuchi, as we mentioned, um, unfortunately committed suicide a little over a year ago, and the husband she left behind is somebody we've talked about way in the past. That's Taiki Nakabayashi, the who's become a well-known actor in the years since we first mentioned him way back in version 1 when he made his big break playing Godai in a live action adaptation of Maison Koku. He won an open audition for that. And
Oh.
that was his big break, and he's become a rather prominent actor since then. But yeah, like it's gonna be tough. Those two titles, and looking at some of the list of what's coming up on Crave, it's enough to make me curious about getting a subscription with them. Although I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. They did change their subscription tiers, and I think we'll talk more about that with Mo, especially Mo, because I know he holds a fascination with various streaming services. So let's save the rest of that discussion when he's around the table, okay, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I'd put that out there too. There's the last thing that caught our attention, and that's basically what's on our mind in this for this space heater. Unless you have something else to add, no?
Well, I also placed a pretty big Yen Press order, but that's just a little nugget because I'm trying to fill in a lot of holes in my collection.
I say that about stuff that's now out of print.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
also picked up as much Silver Spoon as I could too. So
good for you.
I'm gonna finish up Barakamon and then try and get most of Silver Spoon dealt with, among others.
Maybe I'll actually read another book. I have time. Anyway, but that's all we got for this space heater chat. So hopefully we'll be able to do a regular episode within the next couple days. But if you have any comments or want to be part of the conversation, you're always welcome around our table. animeroundtable@gmail.com. You can email us old school there. You can contact us on the socials, Twitter and Instagram @Anime Roundtable. And if you're curious about the past, because the past is a wonderful thing overall. It is, you can see where our thoughts were, and here are the lessons we offered way back then. AnimeRoundtable.com is our website, show notes, and our archive of past episodes. And wherever you're listening to this, to help us in the algorithm, give us a review wherever you're listening to this if possible. Because we could always use the exposure.
It'd be nice, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, positive review or good feedback or honest feedback. We'd like to know. But you're always welcome to, be part of the conversation. But hopefully this is the last space heater chat we do before episode 53. So we hope you join us for then. Thanks for listening.